Welcome to the Coptimizer Podcast, a platform dedicated to uncuffing your true potential in public safety. We're here to provide you with valuable tips and insights that will help you optimize your life and career. I'm retired Chief Patrick Flanley, and I'm honored to be your guide and coach on this journey. Here, I'll share the latest insights and strategies to help you survive and thrive in the demanding world of public safety. Our noble duty is to protect and serve. We embody the role of peacemakers in our communities. However, this profession's immense physical and mental demands come with a price. If we fail to take a proactive approach for our well-being and lead ourselves first, then the stress from the job can and will lead to poor health outcomes. We have all seen it play out. Not only does this impact our professional and personal lives, but it also affects our ability to fulfill this sacred duty. Like many of you, my journey has been filled with tremendous challenges, with highs and lows. However, through creativity, experience, and a positive attitude, I successfully managed over 30 years in law enforcement, emerging healthy and happy. Now, I am driven to share what I've learned to show you that the path is not all doom and gloom. There is hope and a profound purpose in serving your community, and I'm here to show you that it does not have to come at the cost of your health and well-being. Join us as we explore cutting-edge research, interview top experts, and share inspiring stories of transformation. Whether on duty or off, it's time to optimize your potential and live your best life. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. This is the Coptimizer Podcast. Greetings all. Welcome back to another episode of the Coptimizer Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Flanley, retired chief of police, and now just kind of like jack of all trades, master of none. Podcaster, consultant, wellness coach, doing a little bit of everything. But I'm really excited about today's interview. I've got Chief Chad Dick on the podcast from Jasper, Indiana. I'm going to let Chad tell you a little bit about his law enforcement background.
All right.
But yeah, I know that was a long, uncomfortable, pregnant pause there. But today, since this is the Coptimizer podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about what we call, some of my slang terms for this program are the Coptimizer protocol, the blood doesn't lie. The blood doesn't lie is the name of this lab testing protocol that we've been using. It's a National Law Enforcement Memorial Destination Zero award-winning program. I just throw that out there, get a little
Awesome.
credibility up front, but we're helping cops, and I call it the blood doesn't lie because that's what we named it when we presented at the IACP Wellness Symposium and the FOP National Wellness Symposium a couple years ago, because we're cops and we're very suspicious people. We have a hard time trusting others because we've spent our career being lied to by people that don't, for some other reason, just don't like to tell the truth. But today we're going to talk a little bit about a special project we've got going on here in Indiana, and Chad is one of our participants, whether it was reluctant or excited participant. We're going to get into that. So,
Right.
Chad, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, first and foremost, Jasper, Indiana, home of Scott Rowland, one of the greatest Phillies ever to play the game, right?
Yes. Yep. Yep. Scott did his high school career here and then moved on and did great things in the MLB. So
Well, it's also home to Nate Schmidt, your predecessor down there.
Yep.
Nate started his career with my police department. We started at the same time, so he was here for a few years before he moved back home. In Jasper, Indiana, it's like the furniture capital of the world as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's what our actually our FOP lodge is called the Wood Capital Lodge because of all the wood industry that's around our area and the furniture making that's done. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things that's going on in Jasper.
Well, the last time I was down there was a few years ago. We had a major building project going. That was my last big project before I retired, but we built a new public safety center here in Lafayette, and we got all of our furniture from Jasper
Oh,
and
cool.
got to spend a day down there doing the tours of the furniture factories, and that was badass, man. I'm not gonna lie. Like I was so impressed, and I always am. Anytime I go to like a factory floor, get to see just like how the sausage is made, what
Right.
happens behind the scenes. Really cool stuff. And
That's the
Jasper is
one
just beautiful, beautiful city.
one cool thing about being the chief is I get these requests to do these safety walkthroughs all the time, per their factory's protocols. They got to meet with the chief, the police chief and the fire chief. And so I've got to be in since January, I got to be in some of these factories that I've patrolled around, since 1997. I've never stepped foot in them and see, what goes on. It's impressive.
All right. Well, before we get rolling in here, can you tell us a little bit about your background in policing? Because Jasper PD is not your first police department, right?
Nope, no, it was not. So, yeah, grew up in the northwestern corner, not too far from you, Patrick, in the little town of Kettlin, so about 45 miles northwest of where you're at. And my father was a Newton County Sheriff's deputy, and then also he retired as a state trooper. And so, growing up around the law enforcement culture, I knew at an early age, I'm blessed. I knew at an early age that's what I wanted to do. And so, obviously, graduate high school, go to college, went to Vincennes University and then Indiana State University until I was offered a job with the state police and all the way back in 1995. Doesn't
Well,
seem
you
like it
and
was
I
all that.
we started the same year.
Doesn't seem like it was all that long ago, but it was. Anyway, go through the 53rd Recruit School of the Indiana State Police Recruit Academy, and they assigned me to the toll road. So the funny thing back in, I swear that um, the counselors had to sit in their office and go, all right, this dart. They had a map of the state of Indiana up on the wall, and they're like, all right, this dart is for Chad Dick, and they threw it and it went to the toll road. And because when they came in and made their big presentation about there's 9 districts that are going to be receiving troopers out of this class, and you got to prioritize this list and do not add any additional districts. Well, the toll road wasn't on there, and so when then Sergeant Dave Benjamin come in and he's like, you know, it was District 11 at the time, District 11, Dick, and I stood up, entered the list, and I'm like, well, that wasn't even on the list. So anyway, I did a year and a half on the toll road, worked the east end of it, looked LaGrange and Steuben counties. And my sister got married the year that I got on the department. And so I come down here, never been to Jasper before, come down here to visit her. And I saw the post sitting on the hill there. And I was like, my gosh, this area is beautiful.
It is
And
beautiful.
so anyway, I stopped in at the post, talked to the lieutenant at the time, and he said, young man, he said, this post is one of these hard ones to get into. He said, because people like to call it the retirement post. He said, because people like it so much they never leave. And I said, well, okay. And he says, but yes, I do have some openings. So I put in for an opening in a 97, transferred down to Jasper, and finished out my career down here.
So
And
he wasn't lying. It was a retirement
it
post.
was, yes. I did do, a stint at headquarters, but I was still here at Jasper. I was
Yeah.
just yeah, that was my technical assignment was at headquarters as a public information officer at the time. And but yeah, that's where I got to move to Jasper and then the whole family not they didn't follow me, they followed my sister really because I followed my sister and then when she had the first grandbaby, mom and dad couldn't stand to be up in Kettlin any longer, or grandma, so they all moved down. And a cousin out of the blue calls and says he's moving down, and Another cousin calls out of the blue and says he's moving. So anyway, so we have our little South family and our North family, and but been very, very blessed. And then decided in 2021 when I got a phone call from a fellow retiree of a job opportunity. I always said during my career I was very blessed to get on at an early age, and so I always said, when I get my 25 on, it's going to be one really bad day or one good job opportunity, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And so I'd signed off that day and hopped on the mower. My phone rings, and it's a buddy of mine that had retired a couple of years before, and so I answered it, and he says, "Hey," the conversation goes like this: "You looking for a job?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "You looking for a job?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, this company I'm working for just created a new position, and they need somebody like you." I was involved in a lot of training throughout my career, and he goes, "They're looking for somebody like you," and blah blah blah. And I said, "What is it that your company does?" And he says, "Utility infrastructure." And I go, "I don't know anything about utility infrastructure." And he says, "I don't think they need somebody who knows a lot about utility infrastructure. I think they need somebody who can organize training and not have to be micromanaged and all that good jazz." So
Yeah.
anyway,
All things that cops are good at. Yeah.
yeah. And so had a long conversation with the person that then became my boss. And yeah, tried that out for 2.5 years. And about a year into it, wasn't that it was a bad job, but it was the fact that I was missing. I mean, the good Lord blessed me with a servant's heart, and I just didn't feel like I was serving. And I missed being in the community because that company at that time was in 25 different states, and I was traveling all over the place. And so I started, wanting to get back into law enforcement. And a opportunity came open to go to the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. They had two opened up a position. They opened up their post side of their house. Um, and we're trying or still are trying to standardize the training that's taught at ILEA, that's taught down at the Southwest Academy, that's taught at the North Academy, it's taught at Fort Wayne's Academy, trying to make sure that all that curriculum's the same. So I got in on the post side of the house and was blessed to be at the Law Enforcement Academy when the opportunity came to serve back here at home. And the Mayor Vonderheide, appointed me to the chief here at Jasper in January, and that's where I've been since. So
Well, it's very appropriate that the chief of Jasper is named von der Heide. It's a good German name.
yes,
And for those that don't know, Jasper is also like has a very strong German cultural background. Pretty cool. Like
yes,
one of the best German restaurants probably in the Midwest is in Jasper, Indiana.
yeah. The Schnitzelbank is here, and so when there's two responses when you say you're from Jasper. There's two responses. One, that German restaurant, what's it called? I said Schnitzelbank. Yes, and the other one is, have you ever eaten chicken at the chicken place, which is in Ireland, which is just a mile from where I live? And I'm like, yes, and they're like, oh man, those two places we come down there all the time just for those two places. So, yeah, the Schnitzelbank is a landmark, is a place that a lot of people come just to eat there. And it's truly an experience. I mean, everybody's wearing their lederhosen and their dresses, and they're playing the German music, and it's truly a unique dining experience and very good food. So
Well, we'll do a little Chamber of Commerce like plug for Jasper, Indiana right now while we're talking about it. So, when you mention Indiana, people, if they're not familiar, if they've not been here, they imagine corn, the Indianapolis 500, maybe Purdue, IU, Notre Dame, Indiana State, some of these bigger colleges. But Southern Indiana it's like a different country compared to Northern Indiana. Yeah, Northern
yes,
Indiana is very flat, a lot of corn land, where Southern Indiana has the Hoosier National Forest, a lot of rolling hills, just Brown County, one of the most beautiful places you can be in the fall. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that people get to Jasper or anywhere in that area and decide, you know what, I think I'm going to stick it out down here.
yeah. Yeah, like I said, I'd never been down here until I came to visit my sister, all the way from the toll road, and drove down here. And the farther south I got, I'm like, I'd always heard, it was beautiful. And when I got down here, I'm like, gosh, it is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And young and single, didn't have any ties anywhere. And I'm like, I'm just gonna go live close to my sister. And little did I know that the whole family would move down, and you know, we'd all call it home, and none of us, wanting to leave. So
Yeah, and that's funny to contrast Jasper in southern Indiana to the toll road because those that aren't familiar with Indiana, the toll road runs along basically on the northern border of the state from Chicago over to Ohio, like over to
yep,
Toledo, like through Fort Wayne. But yeah, the up in Lake County and that area, it's that's the most industrial portion of the state, the old steel
yes,
town. And yeah, so yeah, you went from steel and concrete to rolling hills
and wood
yeah,
manufacturing. Yeah,
yeah, cool stuff. All right, so we'll get into we'll get into some of the career stuff, but um, you know, I've had Tim Horty. Tim's the executive director for the Law Enforcement Academy. I've had him on the podcast. I've also had Troy Torrance on,
yeah,
and so Troy is the director of wellness. I think that might be his title, or something similar to that for the Indiana State Police. One of the things that Troy educated me on was how forward-thinking the state police has been generationally on officer safety and wellness. And I don't want to go too far into it, but if you go back to Troy's episode, you know, he talks a lot about some of the initiatives that were put in place in the 80s and 90s that were, again, I think ahead of their time. And sometimes when you're a trailblazer, things like if you don't have the right person carrying the torch, programs, it's easy to start a program. Sustaining it over the long term is more difficult. But um, how would you, I mean, how, like overall, I mean, when you retired from the state police at 25 years, do you feel like you retired at a point where you were healthy, you felt good, young, energetic, like, hey, I'm going to have a long, healthy career, or, where were you at? Because it's different for everybody.
yeah, yeah. So when I retired, I felt good. I was tired. I'll be honest, I was tired of law enforcement, stuff. I retired as a sergeant. So I was in charge, I was a road sergeant, so I was in charge of guys that work on the road. And there's a lot of stress. I truly believe, I still do, even after being chief for 5 months now, that sergeant's position is one of the most stressful, because they're right there with the guys. They're still out answering the calls. They're having to keep the guys happy or the gals happy, but also keep the administration happy. And it's
You're in
it's
the
very,
churn. I call that the churn.
yes,
You're in the
it's a very
buttermaker.
it's a very stressful job. So health wise, I had gotten on a kind of a health kick. So I think probably as most law enforcement goes, you get out of the academy and you're in some of the best shape of your life, and you're like, all right, just got to keep it. And then the stresses of the job. Like I said earlier, I was very young when I got on, and so it was one of those, you're invincible, and I could eat as many donuts and stop and eat all the fast food I want to, and so anyway, there were, at one point in time I gotten so big, and then I was like, oh, I got to trim down. And so anyway, back, I want to say it was like 20, it was before COVID. So it was 2018, 2019. Um, I had gotten to a point where, and I, to this day, I'm one that's, when I'm working, I'm a uniform guy. I just, you know, my staff was like, "Oh, why are you wearing a uniform?" I said, "That's just who I am. That's who, that's I think the public, when they see a chief, they want to see, that uniform. They want to see that representation." And then I said, "That's just me." And so anyway, that uniform, wearing the uniform, to me was a great um, tool to keep me in shape, because man, when that gun belt started to get tight, you could let it out a notch or two, but then the gun belt gets too short. And or the pants get too tight, one of the two. So it was always, putting that on was always a good barometer of, all right, been eating too much, or you need to exercise or whatever. Um, and so back in 2018, 2019, I did really good. Matter of fact, he's now the lieutenant up at the Fort Wayne post. But Corey, so when I got sent to the toll road, never been up there before, and so the night before, I graduate the academy. The night before I'm supposed to report, I drive up there, ring the doorbell at the front of the post, go in, and there's a trooper sitting in there, and say, "Hey, I'm your new guy," blah 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 blah. And I said, "Can you tell me where there's any cop-friendly hotels in the area? That I'm not looking for price breaks. I'm just looking so I'm not staying in a bad area of town because I don't know South Bend all that well, and at that time that's where the post was located." And she said, "Well, you're not going to stay at a hotel." She goes, we're going to find you a place to stay. And I said, "Well, okay." So anyway, a couple phone calls. And she says, "Hey, there's going to be a trooper meet you at exit 92. Just go over to Elkhart and he'll meet you there. But there are two young guys that just came out of the last class." And I said, "Okay." So I get over there. Well, funny thing was I dated a girl in college from Corey's hometown. And so Corey and I had met. Corey was a town marshal then. And so pull up and Corey standing there, and I said, "Well, hey," and he goes, "Oh my gosh!" So anyway, so the first few months I slept on their couch, and before an apartment came open in that same apartment complex. But anyway, all these years later, Corey and I are in Indianapolis, and I'm like, "Dang, dude, you look good. What are you doing?" And he goes, "Well," he goes, "a buddy of mine hooked me up on these supplements and." So anyway, I started taking these supplements and I started exercising and he goes, "That's where I'm at." At that time, he was getting ready to turn 50. And he goes, I want to feel better at 50 than I did, when I graduated the academy." Then I said, "Shoot me a link." I said, "Because I'm at that point where I want to change my lifestyle." So he did. And so that got me going. And him and I were going back and forth, sharing posts, much like our group here.
Yep.
Kind of having some accountability and showing our sweaty shirts after our workouts, and, those type of things. And so anyway, was religious with that for probably a year and a half, exercising, blah, 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 blah. Comes up to the point of retirement. And when I leave retirement, I go to work for that company, and that was a lot of travel, and a lot of hotel rooms. And I ate a lot of crappy foods and did nothing while I was in the hotel rooms. Even though the workout programs that I
Living large on
use,
that expense account, right? On that per
yes,
diem.
yes. And even though the exercise programs that I'm using currently are the same ones that I used then, are all app based, and I could have very easily went to the health center, the little fitness rooms at the hotels we stayed in, or even done them right between the beds in the room. I just chose not to. And I wasn't wearing the uniform, and I mean, I got up to, I think my highest was 247. And I
How
mean,
tall? How
I
tall are you?
6 foot.
Okay.
So that's the heaviest I had ever been. And anyway, so like I said, year or so into that job, really wanted to get back in law enforcement. So I started watching, what I was eating a little bit, because I'm like, man, nobody's going to want to hire a fat retiree, to be in law enforcement or do, to represent their agency. And anyway, so I started watching a little bit, but, went to the academy when Tim Horty, as you mentioned, he hired me and got there, and I told Captain Cousins, Patrick, I said, "You know what, bud?" And he was in charge of the physical fitness stuff. I said, "You got to get me in shape." And he says, "You just have to show up." And I said, "You are right." So every morning at 0500, I was down there with the basics, um, and helping with exercise and getting back into that routine. However, I was not eating the best. Even though Isaiah, who is now the head chef there at the academy, does an amazing job. Um,
Their
you know,
food
I
is
was
pretty good there.
yes, I was choosing, to still pile on the potatoes and the carbs and those type of things. So I was eating good, but I was also eating, the wrong foods. And so anyway, fast forward to January, sitting at Chiefs conference. I'm 30 days, 28 days into being chief. I'm at the Chiefs conference. You get up there and you talk and I'm like, you know what? This is perfect. I'm looking for some way to get better. I've been, on this thing now for a year. I had dropped. So when I started this, I'd went from that 247 to 217, was where I was at when I started this. And I knew I wanted to get better. So anyway, bought into what you're selling, and as I'm sitting here today, I'm at 181 and feeling better than I ever have. So
That was my next question. So that's almost that's what, 37 pounds if
yep,
my math.
30, 36. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Um, so what am I selling? Well, I'm not really selling anything
Right.
right now. But yeah, you're in a what we're calling a 4-month metabolic reset group. And so being this is the Coptimizer podcast, you're actually the first guest that I've talked to about what one of the things that I do. I've never talked about this on the podcast itself. I've made mention of it, but I really haven't talked at length about what we're doing and more importantly about why we're doing it. So I'll fast, I'll go backwards to you go up to northern Indiana. You're living on the couch with some buddies. You're working. You're in great shape because we all are when we come out of the academy. There are exit
Absolutely.
standards. You have to pass them. Plus, it's part of the culture, and physical fitness is a big part of officer safety. Let's just face it. Like the better shape,
Absolutely.
strong people are just harder to kill, right? And when you're a cop and you're working the street, um, it's important.
Oh,
But
absolutely. I mean, FBI has done studies on it,
yeah,
that those that have assaulted officers, when they asked him why this officer, they said, well, because when he got out of the car, I could be like, I could take this guy.
yeah.
And so that officer presence and your wellness and your conditioning, not only internally is healthy for you, but externally when the bad guys are looking at to attack and you're looking like you're scored away and you know how to handle yourself, that deters them. I mean, it's proven by their studies. So
But one of the things we're getting a little bit better at this. I think we still have a ways to go as just as policing as a profession. But one of the things they didn't really, I know they didn't teach me when I was in the academy. And I've told my story. I'm not going to go into it because I've told it several times. But how I kind of stumbled onto some of the things in terms of nutrition, and at the core of what we're talking about, managing insulin and insulin resistance. Um, when you start working nights, uh, nights are fun, man. Like that's where all the action is. That's where young cops want to be. But when you're working shift work, it can wreak a little havoc on your system. Sleep deprivation can reduce your insulin sensitivity. Drives cortisol levels up. It leads to glucose dysregulation. Um, and when this continues over time, it leads to chronic low-grade inflammation, which ultimately uh, is driven by many things. It can be circadian disruption, it can just be poor nutrition, lack of exercise, unmitigated stress because the job, even though sometimes when you're young, it doesn't necessarily feel stressful. It just, it feels exciting. That's you like it's that adrenaline, that dopamine that we're getting. We don't understand necessarily that the impact that it's having on what we call that adrenal cortical connection. And so it has an impact in what we call insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is not uncommon in the US. Um, Matter of fact, I just saw some data just a couple weeks ago, and I've seen it a few times this year, but they're 92% of America, 92% of Americans are metabolically dysregulated in one form or another. So less than 10% of the country is really running on, if we're an eight-cylinder car, uh, most of us are running on four. And, there's very few people that are running on all eight cylinders and feeling really good. And, for cops, that those numbers actually run higher. So we're talking, close to, I would say, and I'll go backwards a little bit. I got connected with this group out of Reno, Nevada, Specialty Health, Dr. Jim Greenwald. Um, when I was seeking out somebody that I could work with as a chief for a wellness initiative that I had been working on inside of our police department for a while, like I wanted labs. I wanted to show people um, through their blood work what was happening, what chronic stress, what just the lifestyle of policing can do internally to and how it was negatively impacting their insulin levels. And uh, that's when I came across Dr. Jim Greenwald. And when you think about chronic stress and cortisol dysregulation, most cops are familiar with the term hypervigilance. Kevin Gilmartin is the one that really coined that phrase. He wrote about it. He wrote about it in his book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. And um, little unbeknownst to me, I had met him several times. We actually brought him into our agency in the early 2000s to present. We issued his book to every one of our police officers, when they got hired. Um, what I didn't know was that Kevin Gilmartin and Dr. Jim Greenwald were friends. And so when I was actually at one of our chiefs conferences and I was working on these projects, working on a parallel path, coming from a CrossFit background and a nutrition for a performance background, as I almost didn't go the day Kevin Gilmartin was presenting because I had seen him several times before. I was very familiar with his work. It turns out I went anyway, and he spent the first hour talking about this. He made this analogy about the cops being like a hibernating bear, and about how they pack on, they eat all this food, throughout the summer and fall to pack on a bunch of weight. And he talked about the process of insulin resistance. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. I've never heard him mention this before. And he's really talking about a lot of the things that I've been talking about for the last decade. And so I hit him up on a break and I said, hey, this is really cool. In policing, we've been really good about talking about the emotional impact of stress and how it can create anxiety and some of these other things, but we've always tried to silo it from physical health and the impact that nutrition has on our physical health and our emotional health. And you really sound like another friend that I've come to know, and his name's Dr. Jim Greenwald, and he was like, Greenie, and
Yep.
so and in the end, when fast forward 5 years later, when we presented some of the first data from what we were doing with these labs, I presented with Kevin Gilmartin and Dr. Greenwald. So that just kind of everything went a little bit full circle, which was really cool. But at
Yep.
the core of what we're talking about is insulin resistance. And a lot of people just they don't even know what it is. And so if I explain to them like, hey, do you understand how your nutrition is impacting your insulin levels? They're kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about. So before I, drudge on here and talk more about that, like was insulin resistance something that was on your radar, or was this a term that like, okay, I've never heard this. What is it?
I had heard it because I had two read Dr. Gilmartin's book, and so I'd heard it, but had completely, wasn't on my radar at all. Um, and so when you started talking about it, and then started talking about, opportunity to get healthier and stuff like that, that's when I started to tune in and wonder a little bit more about what it is, and especially with the lifestyle that I was doing, going to the Dairy Queen at 9 o'clock at night and getting the Blizzard and eating that and then going to bed. How much healthier can that be? So um, anyway, so and several times I've been telling my wife as we're going, where I'm like, you know what, this can't be good for diabetes and stuff. You know, this late at
Right.
night going to get this type of food, and then literally when you're done, going to bed, So yeah, so it started to pique my interest there back in January when you started talking about it.
And I'm glad you mentioned diabetes because insulin resistance is the precursor to type 2 diabetes. It's the canary in the coal mine. And if you're tested in the right way, and if you're given the right data, we can see long before, like anywhere from 10, 15, sometimes even 20 years out, like the trajectory that starts, right? And I'll preface this by saying again, I'm not a doctor. I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night. What I'm telling, I am a retired police officer. I was a chief for 10 years. And I'm a CrossFit trainer. I've trained thousands of people over the years and, just in law enforcement through the CrossFit gym. So, what I like to say is I'm a practitioner at heart, and I know what works and I know what doesn't work. I'm not a zealot in any one thing. I don't advocate that, oh, everyone should do a ketogenic diet, everybody should do CrossFit. But what I am an advocate for, just like I was as a police chief, when I'm trying to understand how to best deploy our resources and generate the highest level of value, I have to look at data and I have to understand what I have, what impacts our data in a positive way. And that's ultimately where, I kept coming back to all these some different pilot studies that I ran was what we're talking about is data. We're talking about lab work. I can talk about emotions. I can talk about feelings. I can talk about our emotional connection to food. I can talk about stress levels. I can talk about these things ad nauseum. Um, but it's when we look at data and we show a trajectory that you're on, and we can tell you there's hundreds of clinical studies and trials that have been done that will show you that the longer you're insulin resistant, the path, the more likely you are on the path to type 2 diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and all the other diseases of inflammation. So if we can see that data and then we can give an intervention and then we can retest and show, well, which way is the data moving? Just like a crime prevention program or some other strategy, uh, if we can see the data moving in the right direction, then we can begin to narrow in on what works and what doesn't work. And again, that's ultimately where we came up with the blood doesn't lie. So um, I've done this program, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're looking at specifically. But before I dive into that, it all kind of just begins with a little bit of a story, and that story is it's Chief Chad, it's Chief Pat here, it's the other 30 chiefs that we offered this program to in Indiana. It's my police department. It's all the work that Specialty Health has done throughout the state of Nevada and quite frankly around the country. The Transform Conference with Chief Joe Monroe down in Kentucky, where we've introduced this program. What we're talking about is like when we look at people, we can kind of take a snapshot based on their physical appearance about whether we consider them healthy or unhealthy, whether we consider ourselves like in great shape, decent shape, or we know that we're obese, maybe that we've got some other issues. We can when we go to our doctors, and or if well, let me ask you this question. So, with the state, I'm not sure what the state police does, but are you required to get an annual physical with the state police when you're working with them?
I don't know if they are now, but you were not. So when, go back earlier when you asked me about, what they do, early on, there wasn't really, in my career, there wasn't much, health. I mean, there was stuff out there, but once again, you kind of ignored it because you're young and invincible and, you're going to live forever type thing.
Yep.
Um, and really when they brought Troy on, Troy kind of, he struck a balance, with being knowledgeable, and, being somebody that guys would listen to. And so, he started putting out stuff and you know, kind of literature and different things that you could do. And he was always available. All you had to do was call him if you wanted a diet and you wanted, exercise plan, whatever it is you wanted help, wellness wise and health wise, he would provide it, would work with you through that. And so he's done, I mean, like I said earlier, I've been involved in training a lot. And one thing we noticed is when he took over, some of the physical aspects of our academy, and doing CrossFit and those type of things, the condition. I thought I was in good shape when I got out, but I was back at the old, let's do some I think they called them side straddle hops,
Yeah.
jumping jacks, and push-ups, and let's go run, and but doing what he does with them, and of course they've got, state-of-the-art gym now, there at the academy. Um, what he's done with them is like these kids that are coming out, it's like, holy cow, they are strong. And if they could just keep that with them, they're going to be good. If they
Yep.
could do it, because he even, I talked about the food there at the academy, but Troy even, has a stricter diet. And so when the cadets for ISP come in, um, some of the foods that are there for the basics, aren't there for them. He goes and removes them and makes sure that they're not there. Just because he's looking at the sugar content and the carbs and those different things.
Yep.
So yeah, he's truly got their backs, and that's such a huge perk, I guess, to be in there and having him. And I can remember, excuse me, probably a couple of years before I retired, we're all there at the academy because I was a field training coordinator. So anyway, I was in charge of the field training process at our post, and we're having a meeting, and one of the older guys that retired shortly after that meeting had said they were talking about fitness, and Troy was just going on about, man, if guys would just, I remember talking, if guys would just pay attention um, to what it is they're putting in. He goes, so many guys work out, work out, work out. And he goes, they have it backwards. He goes, they think they do 80% of the work, and 20% of it's what they put in it. And he goes, it's just the opposite. He
Yeah.
said, 80% of your health is what you put in your body, and 20%, what you do with your body as far as your physical activities and those type of things. And I just remember him saying that and been like, yeah, I need to change. And of course, it takes into January 1st to February, and you guys giving me a blood test, to go, "Phew, wow, my blood's jacked up." So, yeah. So it's one of those things where those opportunities are there so many times, and you just choose to ignore them. And yeah,
Yeah, and but so that story is the same across the country. There are some exceptions, right, to every story, but generally speaking, less than 2% of police departments have mandatory physical fitness requirements. So everyone comes out of the academy, they're in good shape, and then they go hit the street, and then they go work, and then they never have to be tested again. And that, people outside of law enforcement, that generally shocks them. They're like, "What?
yep,
Like you don't have to take an annual physical fitness test?" And it's like, "No." And a lot of times unions and the FOP sometimes can get crossways about this, in terms of like if an agency want like, well, hey, everyone needs to get an annual physical fitness, or I'm sorry, a physical exam, just like you would before in high school, before you can play high school sports every year. I've had three boys that have gone through this, right? They all have to get a checkup every year. Most employers provide this. Most of it is covered under preventative health screening, but police departments, for whatever reason, a lot of time, like there are a variety of reasons they don't mandate it, they don't require it. So what happens is like it's the creep of life, and when you're like all those things I mentioned earlier, you're young, you're energetic, you're athletic, you're in shape, and then the next thing you know, you're on night shift for the next 3, 5. For me, in my case, it was I worked some form of night shift or close to 15 years straight till I was almost 40. I loved it, but underneath the hood, like your body, it can absorb a lot when you're young, but as it's these cumulative effects that take root over time. And what we're finding in the police population is that younger and younger and younger cops are becoming more obese, more sedentary, and more chronically disease ridden. And it's also it's not just impacting their physical health and their physical performance. We also know now through the work of like people like Dr. Chris Palmer and others, like there are some very strong connections to our emotional and mental well-being as well, to as a result of metabolic dysregulation. So what is insulin resistance, right? It's like you get these labs now, and I'm going to go through what we're testing for in this program, but you others in the program, for all of us that do this, right? Like the story is the same as I was talking about, right? What is LPIR? What does that stand for? That's your lipoprotein insulin resistance score. And a good way to kind of describe it, it's like a smoke alarm for your metabolism. Like you can see, like when you see smoke, you know that there's an issue somewhere. And what you don't want to do is wait until the house bursts into flames before you try to put the fire out. And unfortunately for cops, the first fire oftentimes that we're putting out is a heart attack. It's the number one killer of cops. 18 times that, some data goes even to 25 times that the rate of being killed in a violent assault or being in an assault is heart attack is the number one killer. The number two killer, suicide. And what did we just talk about? Metabolic dysregulation. So insulin resistant is that smoke in the room. It's that silent precursor to type 2 diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's. And here's the kicker. Most of us have no idea. Why? Because when you get that, if you get that annual test, generally what they're looking at is your lipids, your HDL to LDL to triglyceride ratio. That's what most people get. If your resting blood glucose is over 100, but below 120, your doc is probably going to tell you, hey, this is creeping up. Keep an eye on that. Um, that's pretty much standard, unless you have a very forward-thinking doc that's staying up on a lot of this new metabolic research that's come out in the last decade, saying, anything over 100 is a problem. Really, anything between 90 and 100 is cautionary, like you're on the path already. So that's already kind of one of those first warning signs. But again, like I said, most people they're not looking at that and they have no idea. Or if their cholesterol, their total cholesterol hits, a point where it's over 200 or 250, depending on where you are, or what your doctor's beliefs are, without even trying to diagnose why your cholesterol is up, they hand you a statin. And I'm not an anti-statin person. I'm not an anti-pharma person. Big pharma in general, is responsible for a lot of lives saved. You could also argue it costs a lot of lives too, but that's a whole different thing. But what I'm saying is, like, what are the mechanisms at play that are driving those numbers, and what does it really mean in terms of our health? So if you've got no idea and you're getting these typical tests and you're like, hey, you're good to go, lose a few pounds, work out a little bit more, right? That's kind of like, yeah, like you talk about the gun belt test, right? That's very common for cops, right?
Oh,
But I think you were feeling this, right? You're feeling fatigue. You're not necessarily understanding the impact that stress might be having on you. Maybe sleep's impacted. We know nutrition is, this, what we don't talk about a lot is, well, why do we gravitate towards some of these things like fast food or certain things in the grocery? What is it that makes those things so easy to pick up and so hard to actually put down and not eat? Like we don't, in short, what we don't understand are these physiological processes that are going on, the battle between serotonin and dopamine and the reaction to what carbohydrates are driving inside of our system. And so we give you this test and we show you this LPIR score. Do you remember what yours was off the top of your head when
mine
it?
was 70, I believe, at the beginning.
All right, 70. So if you look at if like what we're testing for, and this is a LabCorp test that we use. We're talking insulin resistance, really. Like you have insulin sensitive and then insulin resistance, and we'll talk about what that process is in just a second. But if your score is at 70, that's putting you in above the 75th percentile uh, towards insulin resistance. So you're on like the far right end of the spectrum in the danger zone. And where we want you is under 20 in that 25th percentile or below. We want that LPIR score really to be below 40 and ideally below 25. What we also want is we're looking at not just your total cholesterol, but we're looking at your HDL-P, your particle, your LDL-P, your small LDL-P, and your LDL size. We're looking at large pattern A versus small pattern B. And this, like, I'm not going to give a master class on insulin resistance here. I'm just kind of giving like just a really high level overview of why we test for it because what this is saying is like your when you eat carbs, right, your glucose level goes up because your brain loves glucose, your body wants it, so your body produces insulin to convert that to energy. And the short version of the long story is anything that's not used is converted to fat to be stored and used later. And And the problem is that most of us are consuming too many and in forms that are very simple for our body to convert into blood sugar, and we're storing excess body fat. And it's happening very quickly because of several processes, but the hyper palatable food and just an excess of caloric intake in the form of processed and refined carbohydrates, a lack of movement, sedentarism, high stress, high cortisol levels. So we've got all these things kind of working against us. And in the end, what we're talking about insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity. It's our body's ability to transfer between energy systems where we're burning glucose for energy versus ketones. Uh, and that's kind of where we are. And before I say anything more on that, I kind of want to I kind of want to just ask you a few questions because going into this process, you didn't understand any of that. Like this is all foreign to you. And it is to most of us because most of us are never taught this. It's not something that you learn in high school. It's not something you learn in health class. Um, we have all kinds of mixed messages that are really confusing us as to about what we should do. And then we have all these things about, what we should do versus what we want to do.
Right.
And then, in conflict with where we want our results to be. So, you get this test because here's what I did, right? I just the data that I just presented to you, I presented at our Chiefs conference as I've presented in the Blood Doesn't Lie program and at Transform and through our submission to the Destination Zero and just talk about it. Like, and when I did my agency, I didn't force anyone to take these labs. Uh, I offered it to all, basically 200 employees, all of our sworn and civilian personnel. I had 115 take me up on it. Um, I found it within my budget to pay for this. And of the 115 we tested, 85 people had at least one high risk area that they were unaware of. And so from there, we just go through a process of educating them on, well, here are the things that we're testing for. Here are the 7 lines of data. 5 really we call the big 5, right? The 5 that we're looking at. And I guess now is probably as good a time as any to really talk about what those big 5 are. But what we're talking about are we're looking at just our overall waist size, whether we're obese or not, our blood pressure. If some of the other things you can look at are your prior use of tobacco, your triglyceride, the HDL levels, And then in terms of the lipids, we look at cholesterol, total number, LDL, HDL, triglycerides, then that ratio, and then your non-HDL um, lipids, and then your blood glucose. So there's a calculation that's made based on these risk factors that calculate what your LPIR score is. Um, and looking at you, you felt like, and we identify these things in the test. We just say, look, if you see the number is red, that's problematic. Like, so if you see yellow, that's cautionary. And if you see green, that means those numbers are good. So for you, you had your triglyceride levels looked pretty good because they were below 150. Your HDL, your high density lipoproteins were cautionary. Your glucose was actually fairly decent. Like for most cops that we look at, you were below 100, above 90. So that, that you fell, you were in the cautionary zone there. Not a tobacco user, not a bad triglyceride to HDL ratio. So, but the waist size had crept up, the blood pressure had crept up, total cholesterol was up. Um, and now we're starting to see when we start to capture this in just from a more comprehensive perspective, that LPIR score starts to go up. What that's telling us is that your cells are no longer insulin sensitive; they are insulin resistant. You're on the path, and you didn't know it. Some of the things that it's maybe some of the things you could feel. So you get that, so you get those labs back, and you're looking at it, and you're probably like, "All right, what in the hell does this even mean?"
Well, I can remember the day I'm looking at it. I'm standing there at I'm one of those that stands when I'm working. And so I'm standing there at my desk and I'm like, holy cow, what's all this mean? But I do know one thing, red usually means bad, yellow means cautionary, and green means probably you're good. And I'm seeing all these reds and I'm like, my gosh, and my phone rings and it's Greeny. And he is like all excited. I mean, he is just like, you know, "Oh, I'm so glad that you joined us. Well, you're the guy we're looking for, la 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 la." And he starts explaining some of the stuff, and I said, "Time out." I said, "You are awful excited for what it is that I'm looking at." And he had said, I said, "Because I feel like I'm going to die probably tomorrow." And he goes, like, "Oh, you're not going to die tomorrow." And then he pauses for a second, goes, "Wait a minute. I'm not that guy," he said. He goes, "But if you start to follow what we're doing," he goes, I can assure you that you're going to get healthier." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I'm all ears, start explaining this stuff to me." So, um, yeah, yeah, like you said, blessed to have him part of this because he's very knowledgeable and one of those guys that keeps you motivated. So,
Yeah, and so the I guess I didn't get around to the big five, right? So really, what do we look? We look at glyc A, which is an inflammatory marker. Uh, um, that's an advanced lab test that some docs will check for, some won't. Most will look at your A1C, your hemoglobin A1C, and that's a 3-month inflammatory marker. So the good thing about that is like even if I mean, ideally when you're getting tested, you want to be fasted, but your HbA1c is not going to be influenced by, if you had a bad week, like maybe you're stressed out, you're off your normal routine. It's really going to give you a snapshot of about 3 months. Your LDLP, your total particle count, um, your LPIR, which we mentioned, but there's another thing that we test for, and this is something you and I are the unfortunate lottery winners of a genetic trait called lipase small a, LP little a. Um, and that is, uh, I would encourage people, even if you don't do these labs, next time you get your labs done, demand that you get tested for LP little a. Um, and you only really have to get tested once because it's about 80 to 85% of the population does not carry this trait. So between 15 and 20% do. It's genetic. No one really understands what the purpose of this extra module is on your LDL cholesterol. But what we do know is it's an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And sadly, the most time people get diagnosed with this is if they survive their first heart attack. if they've had chronic elevated levels for a long time. There's LP little a doc on Twitter. There's a lot of people that are doing really good work on this now. We're starting to learn more. But again, this is one of those things where you want to know if you have this trait or not, because the only way, well, they're in phase 3 clinical trials right now of a treatment, a clinical treatment. It's a Lilly program that specifically could address LP little a. But until that time, until we know more, lifestyle intervention is really the only thing that you can do. So we test for it because once we test for that, that can give us really kind of a roadmap as to where to go next. It gives the doctors that run this program an opportunity to intervene early and do additional testing for people that do have the trait, or if that LP little a number is high, it can lead to things like making sure you get a coronary calcium score done, like a heart scan, making sure that you get maybe a carotid artery scan. Uh, there's some other tests that can be done as well, but it's all going to depend on what your independent numbers are and what your independent risk factors are. But it all starts with the labs and getting the labs done. So that's yeah. So fast forward. Let's go to January. Um, I've we this is the second time that we've offered this through the Indiana Chiefs. We did it about 4 years ago. We did it with Precision Health Reports with Matt Martin, who's been on the podcast before, and Doc Bill Cromwell. Um, Again, sadly, when I offered it back then, I don't know if I just didn't scare people enough with my presentation, or if I was like, maybe I've gotten more refined as I go. Um, but when we offered this, we wanted to test 15 people for free, and I basically had to beg like 9 people to do it, and then we presented in the conference, and so it had been several years. We're learning a lot more as we go. We really wanted to get this done. So I'm like, there's a lot of things that I can do in my post-retirement to help cops. And that's, kind of one of my callings, one of my missions is one of the reasons I do this podcast is I want people to bankrupt our pension funds. I want cops to live long, healthy lives. But sadly, that's not what's happening. So sorry, that's a little bit of a long diatribe there. But for people that aren't familiar with this program, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. So we got you tested back in February, um, and now with you, what we did is we offered this up to 30 people, 30 chiefs in that conference, and by the end of that, within an hour of me presenting the data on this, and again, that presentation's an 8-hour presentation that I jammed into about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, I had 30 people sign up, and I'll talk about the full results in August once we present our findings in the end of July on this. But the reason I wanted to get you on right now is because for a small group of people, we ran a little challenge in the middle. We're working with Dr. Charlie Cavo and his group, and we did a 30-day challenge inside of this 4-month metabolic reset program. And so what we do, and again, without going into all the details, what we do is we give you um, a guide. It's basically a 40-page document on, hey, here's a nutrition plan that is very effective at helping reverse uh, insulin resistance. And we give you all the educational information that goes along with it. We had a 4-hour class that we did online after in your case, it's Dr. Greenwald that called you and went through the results. As we scale this program up, it'll be a healthcare practitioner that goes through those results with you, and really just kind of gives you a basic, an education on where you are. It's a snapshot of where you are in time, what your labs are telling you about your health, and that trajectory that you're on. Um, and then we kind of just let you go at it, right? We provide the 30 set challenge group. We got a small subset of you, and we just get on a weekly call, and we are doing a pilot project right now with this little device right here, which is called a Keto Air, and this measures breath ketones. Um, but it's one of many tools that we can use to kind of help give you a little daily guidance on, what works, what doesn't work. And so this is a long way to get to where I want to spend the next, 20, 30 minutes with you, just kind of talking about, okay, what did I learn from the test? What did I change? And how is it impacting me right now? And where am I hoping to be 2 months from now? Because the numbers, like we've already given one teaser, was that you're down almost 40 pounds since February.
Right.
All
Right.
right. So your losses are like, boom, like you're on the path, man. And that's good, right? Because a scale tells us one thing. It tells us how much we weigh. And
Right.
we can do some calculations based on height weight ratio, height, all those things. But it's good to to know that you're reducing some notches on the belt, but when you got that mid lab test, so first of all, you see those numbers, you're scared shitless, you think you're gonna die. Greenie tells you, no, you're not gonna die.
Right.
We get you on the plan, and now we got you tested a little bit more than halfway through, and we're gonna test you again in a couple months. Um, what was your thought when you opened up when you saw the labs come back on this mid program test?
Yeah, so the crazy thing is, I had not seen the labs. I'd gotten the email that I'd gotten the lab, that the results are in. Wednesday nights, I help out at our church with our youth, and so anyway, I'm out there and my phone's ringing, and it's Greeny. And I'm like, crap, I'm right in the middle of worship. I can't answer this. So anyway, I told him I'll call him back, and he sends me a text, and he's like, please call me back. It's great news. And so I'm like, okay, shoo. So anyway, on my way home from church, I give him a call, and he's like, he goes, just so you know, he goes, I've been doing this for 25 years and about 22,000 patients. And he goes, you have set the record. And I go, I set a record for what? He goes, you've set the record for turning around your LPIR score. And I said, really? He goes, you were at a 70. He goes, per your test, you're at a 12 currently. He goes, that's the farthest swing that I've ever seen in this short amount of time. He goes, what are you doing? And I said exactly what you told me to do. Um, Making healthier choices. I used to be one. And my wife used to make fun of me. I'd come in, and I've told her this for years. I said, our house, you come in through the garage, and the first place you step into is the kitchen.
Yep.
And so I'd always stop at the snack drawer, and there's always chips in there, or Cheez-Its, or whatever. Um, and so I mean, before I'd even get out of uniform or whatever it was I was wearing that day, before I would even ask her, um, how her day was, my hand is in that drawer, and I'm grabbing a couple chips, and they're like, "Hey, how was your day?" And so I told my wife for several years, I'm like, the next house we have, the kitchen is going to be off in some far remote part of the house that you only walk to when you're hungry. Because this being the thoroughfare is terrible, because you got the chip drawer, to our right, and to our left is our pantry. And So anyway, one of the biggest things I do, I was like, you know what? You have offered me a gift by letting me know what my work looks like. Um, you guys have said we're going to be held accountable. By having the group, and they told us, report every day, put down what your macros are, what your carbs, your fats and your proteins are for the day, and what you're blowing on the keto air. Not only will that help keep you accountable, but it'll help motivate, some of the others in the group. And so as I'm sitting there, during the day, and of course, as any good police station, and we are so blessed here in Jasper to have a community that truly supports us. So there's people all the time wanting to bring us donuts and muffins, all the goodies of the world
Yep.
that are, I mean, and they're great. Um, but that stuff is sitting around, and I'm like, you know what? I've got to not. Yeah, I'm not going to cut a corner off. I'm just not going to do it, because I don't need it. And so what I found myself, when I started making the choices, and when I was coming home, instead of going to the chip drawer, I would go grab, some string cheese, or maybe some lunch meat, as a snack, versus, something like that, or grab, broccoli or something, stuff that we didn't typically used to have in our refrigerator. We started, having, and so, it was just coming down to me going, all right, I'm going to make different choices. And the crazy thing is, the very first group call that we had, um, my son is a big bowler, and so my family, um, every first Friday of the month, we go to our local bowling alley because they've got great pizza, and we just go there, and that's our thing. But so one of our first calls, is going to the bowling alley to watch my son. And I'm like, you know what? It's Tuesday night. I know I'm going to be having for dinner pizza, because that's what the bowling alley has. And I'm like, we're just got done talking about what you need to make better choices. And so that night, I was like, you know what? I'll eat some pizza, but I'm not going to eat the crust. I'm just going to scrape off the toppings, which we usually get some vegetables and meats and cheeses. And so anyway, I did that. My wife looked at me. She goes, "You're nuts." And I'm like, hey, I said, I'm not doing this to try to lose weight or anything like that. I said, I'm doing this to try to correct my blood. I said, because that's what scares. It scared me. My blood
Right.
is jacked up. I said, so I'm not looking, to try to do this, because now obviously when you drop, as much weight as I have, everybody's like, "Are you okay?"
Well, because not
You
only
know,
did you have a high LPIR score, but your A1C was over 6. And generally, what a standard of care, they're going to probably put you on metformin or tell you that you're on the path to diabetes.
right,
So there's going to be a pharmaceutical intervention. Your glyc A was over 400, so you were in the danger area there, in the moving into the high risk areas. So that's when you say, hey, I'm not necessarily I'm not worried about my weight. I'm worried about my blood, because my blood is the better predictor of chronic disease moving forward. So I just wanted to stop real quick and point that out, because it's a key distinction. Like weight is one indicator, but it's only one.
right.
Um,
And so people are like, "What are you doing to lose weight?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to make my blood healthier, and the result has been that I've been dropping weight." And they're like, "Well, what are you doing?" So, I was starting to explain. As a matter of fact, we had a men's retreat, this past weekend, and so a group of guys are just like, "Man, we've been seeing you at church, and I've never really talked to these guys before." And they're like, "Man, we've been seeing you in church, and you're really looking healthy. What are you doing?" And so, I tell them the story. And I said, got these blood tests, and it just scared me. And so I said, they put me on, we went, started cutting the carbs and eating healthier. I said, then the whole month of April was this challenge where we had to keep our total intake for the day at 20 grams or less. And I said, so having to do that, and they go,
20 grams of carbs, just for
yeah,
people
20
that are
grams,
listening.
20 grams of carbs or less a day. And they're like, "What in the world do you eat?" I said, "It's crazy what you can eat and not have the carbs." Um, I said, when they started this, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to eat?" And then I said, when they sent me the dietary stuff, and it's like, well, a sample breakfast is uh, 2 egg omelet with cheese and bacon. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. That's right up my alley. Don't have the hash browns and the toast and everything else that goes with it. Um, so started doing that, and I know you pointed out several times, and Graham, one of the coaches that's in our group, he was like, "Hey, your calorie intake is really low." Well, I was like, you know what? What I was finding was I wasn't as hungry as I used to be. And I was also like, you know what? Reading up on some intermittent fasting and just different things. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to eat when I'm hungry, versus, oh, it's noon, it's time to eat, type. type mentality. So that's what I started doing. What I've noticed, I even said this to my wife last night as I was trying to catch up on my logs because of technical difficulties. And so I'm catching up on my logs and I'm like, gosh, we went to a Mexican restaurant yesterday after church and instead of having, all the tortillas and all that stuff, I did have a couple chips, which was out of the, even my son, he looked at me and he's like, "Ooh, you're eating a chip." And I'm like, "Yeah," you know, um, and, but, instead I just had, I had the fajita vegetables with some shrimp, um, and didn't have all the extra stuff that goes with it. And then last night as I'm typing in, I'm like, gosh, I still got 800 calories to go. And I said, I feel like I have eaten and eaten, you know. Um, but I said, there's still out of my 1800 calories that, the app has, when I put in my goals and stuff and said I could have a day, I still had 800 to go. And, I had eaten breakfast, I'd eaten a bigger lunch than what I normally do, and I'd eaten dinner. And so it all comes, I mean, it just truly comes down to having the mental fortitude to just go, you know what, I'm trying to do this, not, this isn't a fad. And I think I reached out to you guys. I'm like, hey, one of my questions is, what's the next step? Like, how do we maintain this? Because I'm currently, I'm like, I haven't weighed 181 pounds probably since I left the academy. I mean, it's been that long that I've weighed 181 pounds, and but the weight still, it just keeps coming off. It's because I'm making healthier choices. I am I get up every morning and first thing I do is read my Bible verse of the day, and then the next thing I do is turn on the TV, get my app going for my exercise, and boom, the next 45 minutes to an hour, I'm exercising. I get that done before anybody else gets out of bed. And it has just made my days go by better, makes me feel like I've already accomplished something, um, makes me grateful that I'm able to exercise and do that, because there's so many in the world that would love to be able to do that that just can't for whatever reason.
Yep.
And so, anyway, it's truly been, thankfully I was at that conference, heard you speak, and it's been life changing.
So, do you have your mid labs with you handy?
I do hear a couple clicks, and I'll have which one you want, the lab
Well, I'm
report?
just curious, like what's your glycate look what's that number now, if you don't mind sharing it?
Na, 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 na. Find here, glycate. Well, where is it?
And the reason I'm asking, like, um,
Oh, there it is. My glycate went from a 408 in February to a 344.
okay.
So,
So, um, the big question everyone's going to have is, okay, well, what are you eating? And if you say, hey, I'm eating a ketogenic diet, like nutrition is it's such a polarizing conversation with people because there are people that are in the vegan and the vegetarian camps that will say, or the low fat camps will say, oh my God, that's terrible. It's going to kill you. You shouldn't do that. And and they'll give you some convincing arguments as to why you shouldn't. And then you talk to someone that does a ketogenic diet and they'll say, oh, that's nonsense. It's not going to kill you. And so, like, again, like my backyard neighbor, and this is one of the things that Greenie and what Greenie didn't know was like Dr. Sarah Hallberg, who ran the largest clinical study done to date on the impacts of a therapeutic ketogenic diet, a well-formulated ketogenic diet in its ability to reverse type 2 diabetes. You can look up, and one of the first things that we assign people to do is to watch her TED Talk, because she's sadly we lost her to cancer, but she has had such a tremendous impact on the world by doing the studies that she did. And just so Greenie and I, not he had no idea that she was my backyard neighbor. He had been following her work before that, and just kind of like one of those weird twists of fate that connects us. But you know, um, you, I mentioned this because what is glyc A, right? It's you know, traditional inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. You might see that HSCRP on like a lab test. They'll spike in response to like an injury or an illness, but glyc A captures low grade chronic inflammation that builds over time. So what we're seeing is uh, your inflammatory markers are going down. So what did you change in your diet? What did you, if you had to say, like, if you had to summarize in, just briefly, like, what's the biggest change that you think that you made? Is it really more about like, okay, yeah, we're eating more protein or we're eating quality proteins, but we are eating more fat, right? And we're thinking about the types of fat and the quality of fat, but what I try to tell people is like this is like you can be a vegetarian and eat a ketogenic diet. But what we're really cutting out is highly processed foods. We're cutting out a lot of unnecessary sugar because we just dump a bunch of this. And so there is a way to eat in a
Absolutely.
very healthy way that can align with like maybe what you want in a way, like to an extent, almost like but you do have to give up the things that are going to spike your blood sugar and spike your insulin levels. What we're talking about is insulin control. And there's a lot there are different ways to combat this, but we have found like these ketogenic or higher protein, higher fat diets tend to have a they're easy to do, right? Because you don't feel like you're starving yourself while you're doing this. It's fairly easy to follow. You can adjust no matter what, whether you're eating in a fast food restaurant or at home. Uh, there are ways to get this done. And
Yes.
for cops, that's a big thing, right? Because you're in your squad cars, you're on the road, you're busy, your meals get interrupted a lot of times. So being able to eat to satiety is a big thing for first responders. So I mean, again, back to the question, like, what is it like if you were to describe maybe just a couple of things, like if you were to summarize it, what do you think the biggest changes are that you have made that are having such a big impact?
Biggest things. I mean, you've hit them on the head, but for instance, before this, every morning was a big bowl of healthy cereal. Um, and so after start looking and getting educated and start looking at the label, the nutrition labels, like, holy cow, this stuff is terrible. And what I'd find myself was I'd eat this big bowl of cereal, um, and then 2 hours later, just starving. And why? Because it's full of sugar. Even though it was healthy, it's good for your heart. Um, you know, but it was full of sugar and full of carbs. So I mean, that was burning off, and 2 hours later, I'm like, gosh, I'm hungry. Well, what am I doing? Well, hey, those donuts or those muffins that are sitting around the police department. Um, okay, that'll hype, get me over to lunch. Um, so what I do now is some mornings, if I have time, I make eggs, and cheese. If I don't, I have a what I have researched as a pretty quality protein shake, um, that I'll take because it's easy to go and get on about my day. And then what I find is I am not, I mean, there's some days I skip lunch because I'm still not hungry, because I haven't, my blood hasn't done this. So, um, but typically if I do eat lunch, it is, I try to take some type of a salad, and I try to make it not with lettuce, but with spinach because it's got good iron content. I mean, that's the other thing is like, you could eat salads and that salad be worse for you than, eating the greasy cheeseburger, just depending on what it's comprised of, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, you
so
can put a lot of crappy stuff on a salad.
yes, yes. So we're very blessed. We got a place. It's a health food place, that is, just a couple blocks from the police department. And so there's been like a week that I was gone, and then I walk in, they're like, "Gosh, you've been gone for a while," and but anyway, I'm like, "Hey, I'd really like to have this chicken this grilled chicken on spinach, with some shredded cheddar, um, and some celery. Maybe throw a couple nuts up. Absolutely. And what's your healthiest, what's the healthiest dressing? And I don't want you to put it on. I want it in a cup on the side. And what I have found is I hardly use any dressing, which is typically the worst part of it. Um, so that's a change. I already mentioned going to the bowling alley. It's scraping the toppings off and eating the meat, the cheese, and the vegetables part of the pizza, and not all the bread part of the pizza, or the breadsticks, or the fried pickles, or I just don't. I drink a lot of water. Um, um, the Coptimizer, one of Greenie's concoctions. Put that in there. Usually, typically after my workout to get my uh,
Your electrolytes.
electrolytes. Yeah, and then just cutting out. Like I said, when I get home, I'm not going. I'm not going to the snack drawer, not grabbing. Matter of fact, my wife goes, "Well, we got to throw these away because they went stale," and I'm like, "Oh, sorry." I'm just you guys can
That's
eat them if you
okay.
want, but I'm not going to eat
Yeah.
them. And then what we started doing at dinner, we used to eat out a lot. So, there's all these different fresh food and things that you can get that gets delivered to your house, um, in the correct portion sizes, so you're not wasting. I mean, is does it cost something? Yes, but you're not throwing away money because you typically everything that you get, is consumed in that meal and done. I mean, you don't have a bunch of leftovers that get thrown away or anything like that. So we started eating at home, and eating well-rounded meals versus going to the local fast food places. And the times that we've had to go to fast food, I opt for, and I think maybe you and I had this conversation, but it's like, and I never have been, the big fast food chain fan, but um, you can eat somewhat healthy if you just make smart choices, and just eat the meat and get a salad, those type of things. So anyway, when those times that we do have to go to fast food, it's been, I've opted for a salad, versus what I used to get, the double bacon cheeseburger and fries and stuff like that, because I know you and I had the conversation about the fried potatoes and our LP little A. And I used to be if I could eat fried potatoes, 3 times a day, I would do it. So that's what I've been doing, just cutting things out, switching it up, not trying to eat the same things every day. And now that we've got through the month of April with that 20 grams, I've been experimenting, you know, trying to add a little bit more variety and stuff, and just to see what it does how it affects my ketones, when we do the keto air. And I was blowing 36s religiously, through the month of April. And now what I've noticed is that when I've added, and I haven't added that many, I mean, I'm averaging probably between 35 and 40 carbs, a day. But my score, or my blowing, has went from a 36 to a 25, and we can educate the listeners on what that is, um
Yeah.
but it's still in a very good range. So I have been in ketosis, since the 1st of April. um, and we all laughed about my one story about the Starlight Mint. Um, I'd stopped in our HR department, and she's always got a candy dish there, and I'm just carrying on a conversation. And habit is reach and grab. Oh, there's a Starlight Mint, pop it in my mouth, and we're right in the middle of April. Um, and I'm trying to do good. Well, Starlight Mint is like, just full of sugar. And so about a half hour later, the light bulb goes off in the head, and it goes, I wonder what that's going to do, to your keto air score. And so below that night, and I went from like a 25 to that night being at a 9, because of that's that one Starlight Mint, and that sugar intake that I had. So
Isn't that crazy?
it's
Like,
crazy.
and I
Yeah.
and so that's a great. Let me jump in right there, because like what we're talking about is we're talking about, like, again, put on your in your cop brain. We're talking about intelligence-led policing, data-driven policing. And that's all we're doing. We're talking about data. And here's this is it's nutrition can be so dogmatic to people. And what I would say is like just take a step back. And before you start, jumping on your bandwagon about what, it should be the Mediterranean, it should be the zone diet, it should be the keto diet, it should be vegan, vegetarian. I don't care what you want to do. Here's what I care about is what are your labs telling you and how is it impacting your insulin?
Yep.
Not, not over 3 months, but over the next 3 hours. If you don't know, then you don't know. And how can you make a good decision? Like you can guess, you can make generalities, but so so you mentioned the keto air. Let's just stop right here and just kind of talk about a few things because your A1C was at, I think, 6.2. What's your A1C at now?
Find it here.
So your glyca dropped almost 70 points. Uh, what'd your A1C do?
A1C went from a six
You're
two to a six, so just down 2/10.
so you're down
So
two, right? So
yep,
when we think about what is A1C, right? That again, it's your average blood sugar, your glucose levels over a 2 to 3 month period. It measures how much glucose is attached to hemoglobin, which is the protein in the red blood cells that carry oxygen. And so ideally, you're going to want to get that down to below 5.7.
yep,
5.7 to 6.4, these are our guidelines. That's pre-diabetes. Um, so 6.5 and above is diabetes. So if you've been, got your labs, most people, you could even go back at old labs and generally see that. So um, A1C sometimes, right? It detects pre-diabetes and diabetes, and it can often go undiagnosed for a long time before you actually get treated the way that you should. It's that again, it's one of those little silent things. It can lead to chronic sleep deprivation. Um, and whether you're overweight or not, because we have several participants in this group that if you looked at them, they would appear to be very healthy from a physical fitness and a body composition perspective, but they're running very high levels of their A1C is really high. And that drives things like they're chronically hungry, they're eating a lot, and it's an important number to look at. Um, so what is something like what is the keto air or even like here's another device that I use as well in addition to the keto air, and it's called a keto mojo. I've been using this since 2018. And again, I'm not uh it, I don't consider myself to be a keto eater. I'm more of what they would call like a paleo zone. Like I'm and this is for another podcast, but I'm what they call a lean mass hyper responder, just because of my phenotype and my body composition and just my genetics. So uh, I've made adjustments over the years on what my nutrition is based on what my lab results are and what the daily feedback I get from tools. Like I wear a Whoop, my wife wears an Aura ring. Um, they're like what a keto air measures is your ketones through breath acetone. I think it's breath acetone levels. Um, and what are ketones? They're molecules that are produced in your liver for when your body uses to convert fat to fuel. So Ted Nyman, who's written a great book, he's written a couple of really good books, but he probably has one of the best illustrations that I've seen in terms of helping people understand what ketones are. Um, but your liver, like if you imagine like when you go to bed and you go to sleep, right? Um, you're not eating when you're sleeping, but for people that feel like they have to eat every 3 or 4 hours, or you're going to die, like, well, why don't you die when you're asleep then? Like,
right.
well, it's because your body has metabolic flexibility. It prefers to burn glucose for energy because it's easily accessible because your liver is producing it all the time. When your liver empties its blood glucose, right? It starts producing ketones that will go. And again, if I'm not describing this the exact way, look it up for yourselves. But your body then produces ketones that will then enter the bloodstream, grab your fat cells, convert them into energy. It's Ketones are actually a cleaner fuel, um, so to speak. Um, and one of the things that people first notice when they have a diet, whether it's a ketogenic diet or not, that helps them build that metabolic flexibility, is they like one of the things that they first observe is like brain fog kind of goes away. Like they just feel like, man, I just feel
Yes.
like I'm thinking clear. Like I'm not getting these like crashes like throughout the day where I just feel like, oh, like you feel hypoglycemic, right? Like, oh my God, if I don't eat something soon, I'm gonna die. Like I got to get some food.
And that's
Like,
one of the biggest things I've noticed is that brain fog is, I used to have that a lot. And it usually would become an hour or so after I ate. And I have not had that, for several months now, which has been great. So
yeah. So when your insulin levels are low, your body uses like there's three main types of ketones, right? I think it's like beta hydroxybutyrate, BHB. And that's generally what's most abundant. You have acetone, like which I mentioned, which is exhaled in the breath. Um, and then it's ACAC is the abbreviation. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's measurable in the urine. So again, the benefits to ketones are really in that like they're more efficient for the brain, which helps for that. Again, improve satiety, reduce brain fog, has very beneficial anti-inflammatory properties, and it can be protective against like oxidative stress. And so for cops, why this can be important and why it's probably worth experimenting with your nutrition plan, right? Is like unlike glucose, right, which tends to spike and crash. Ketones are like a steady fuel, and the brain likes that consistency. So um, if you're working a 12-hour shift, um, the last thing you really want are those peaks and valleys, right? You don't want to have that halfway through that shift where you're like, oh my God, if I don't get some foods, it can lead to irritability. You can be tired, it can that, and again, when you think about from a performance perspective, right, it can impact, your ability to think through complex issues. God forbid you have to make, a split second decision. You don't want to be doing stuff like that when your energy systems are jacked up. You want good, reliable energy, and so ketones, there are some advantage to that. So, um, you in April when you were in that reset that subgroup, right? They're asking you to stay below 20 grams because really what we're trying to do, it's almost like an elimination diet. What we're trying to do as an individual is understand for you what spikes your blood sugar and what doesn't. How do you know this? Okay, well, they have these things called CGMs, right? If you've ever seen those patches that people wear, like continuous glucose monitors, um, it's no longer required to have a prescription to get a CGM. And so I would tell people like that would be my number one go-to. Like if you're making a big lifestyle change and you're going to change your nutrition, I would say go with a CGM. Now they tend to be kind of expensive, and they generally go from like depending on the model, like you have to replace them every so often. I think some of them will last up to 3 months, but 4 to 6 weeks. But again, it can give you a good snapshot. What it's going to do is going to, like you eat food, as your body starts to digest it and your insulin levels start to go up, that CGM, like it connects through via Bluetooth right to your phone. So you'll be able to like most type 1 diabetics will wear these because they sync with their insulin pumps. and their insulin, most people know probably at least one person that's a type 1 diabetic. Big differences between those two, but um, the body, the body has to have insulin. Like you can't survive without insulin. So if your pancreas isn't producing enough insulin, or if it's been damaged, or you have other issues, um, then you have to have some way to get the insulin. So insulin pumps or taking shots like diabetes uh, patients will do is important. But without getting too far off track, the CGM will tell you like what foods you're eating and how it's impacting your blood sugar. I've given this example, like you mentioned the cereal in the morning. Like I learned that lesson the hard way, right? A long time ago. Just it's what set me on this path where I started waking up hungry. Like I would eat this big bowl of Wheaties with a banana and some granola in it, some skim milk. And like 2 hours, 3 hours later, I was waking up like famished. Like I couldn't go back to sleep until I started eating. And then, but I changed to eggs and making omelets. And next thing I know, I'm sleeping like a baby. That was what helped me learn about the impact of insulin and how it impacts society, and where then I started reading about things like ghrelin and like these hormones. So again, this is what we're talking about, is controlling hormones. In the CGM can measure your insulin spikes, or how fast and how far your insulin will rise after meals. Um, Another way to do it is through that device, the Keto Air. Um, so just like you said, you had that mint, it had sugar in it, and you realize it just knocked you right out of ketosis by doing that, because what had happened is that glucose enters your bloodstream, and now your body shuts off ketone production, because it's always going to burn glucose first. If you have available glucose, that's what your body's going to use. Um, when we do that over time, right, this is we lose that metabolic flexibility, and your body really like, so one of the reasons why we do these 30-day challenges, or even like this 4-month metabolic reset, is because we're going to help you understand which foods are impacting your insulin, and help you regain control over that metabolic flexibility, because the body is an amazing thing, and it will always, seek that balance. So, uh, this, all you have to do is sync it up to your phone. You blow into it for 20 seconds. It really takes about 5 minutes to run the test. The longest part about this test is this thing just warming up and running through its clean cycle, and then you blow into it and you track it on an app on your phone. Now, the Keto Mojo is also really cool, um, but this requires using a device like this, where you have to stick your finger, and then you have these strips. The good thing about this is you're measuring your glucose in your blood and your ketone levels. Um, so it's really just comes down to which you prefer. The great thing about all these devices is whether it's a CGM, whether it's a Keto Air, whether it's a Keto Mojo, is that they give you instant feedback, direct feedback. So you begin to know over time, like, and the other thing you mentioned was your food log, right? We use MyFitnessPal, which is a great app. They have a free version. There's other versions, and some people can get these through their healthcare providers for free. But I think most people in this business use MyFitnessPal because it's been around a long time and it's super easy. It's to the point now where you can literally take a picture of your plate, and it will, through their AI tools, it will give you a pretty good snapshot of your macros. And your macros are your carbohydrates, your fats, and your proteins. We don't need carbohydrates. You need zero dietary carbohydrates to survive. Zero. Let me say that out loud again for the people in the back. Zero. Your body will produce in your liver what it needs, right? So You don't have to eat dietary carbohydrates. And that again, that's a very, very simplistic um, explanation. But again, I'm trying to keep this podcast under 2 hours, which is I'm dangerously close to running close to 2 hours. Um, so the reason I mention all this, and I'm sorry if I'm losing people or boring them, but you know, you're learning. Uh, the mint knocked you out of ketosis. So
Yep.
people think like, oh, I'll just eat this one potato chip, or I'll just eat three or four of these. Um, you can, but just remember, there's always a consequence. There's always a consequence for the decision. If you go to the Mexican restaurant and you eat half a bowl, and it's hard to eat just one chip, right? So
Yes.
what I would tell people, like when you're new into this, like like you're 3 months in, I would say, eat some chips and see what it does. But if you're 3 weeks into this, I would be like, nope, don't even go to the Mexican restaurant because chips and salsa, dude, like that stuff is like kryptonite, man. Like,
Yep.
and it's like the potato chip. And it's like you're talking about when you walk through the kitchen, it's like your brain knows. Like it knows it doesn't even have to see. It knows what's behind those doors or inside those drawers, inside those refrigerator doors. It knows what's there. And if there's some some chocolate ice cream, insert your favorite kind of ice cream, um, insert your favorite kind of chips, things that are going to jack with that are going to spike your insulin. Your brain knows that. That is your brain screaming for the dopamine. Like, give me a hit,
Yep.
give me a hit. Like, I know it's close. Come on. And you can only walk through there so many times. And it's the same thing at the police department. And I was joking earlier because I did this. Like, I had a bit of a reputation inside the police department, especially when I started putting up signs that said sugar-free LPD. Um, what an asshole was I for saying I don't want people bringing cookies and cupcakes and donuts
Right.
and dropping them into the lounge, because you can only walk by that so many times, right? You go in the if you've let's just say you ate cereal for breakfast. It's the old Chad. You ate cereal for breakfast at 6 a.m. You feel really good. It's 9 o'clock, and you walk by that break room and you smell those donuts or see the cookies from yesterday, and it's just like, those smell good. But oh, you know what? I'm trying to lose some weight, so I'm not going to eat those. Well, then you walk by 10 minutes later, and then 20 minutes later, you walk by again. You know what? I'm just going to go in there and eat half of one because it's getting close to lunch and I'm feeling pretty hungry. So you pick up a cookie, you eat half of it. Oh, well, I'll just finish it. You
Yep.
walk out of there, three cookies down, two donuts, whatever. Like, that's just human biology at work, folks, right? I mean, there's, yeah, there's only so much resistance you can have in a day. And if you're when you put things like that in your environment, like you're setting yourself up for failure. That's why one of the first things that you need to do when you're trying to make these changes is clean your refrigerators out, clean your closets out, get rid of the shit that you know that you're going to want to eat, and give yourself a chance to have some success. And
Yes.
this is your multiple time a day accountability tool, and it'll give you feedback. And you know what? It's just like my poster on the wall there that says all your excuses are lies. Um, yeah, you may not like it. It may make you a little upset to talk about it, but it's the truth, right?
Yep.
That was a long
No,
rant, man. I'm
that
sorry.
that environment thing, it's tough. I've got a 16-year-old son, and my wife, she's mad at me because, I'll be like, "Oh, I dropped another 3 pounds this week." She's like, "Well, I haven't," and she's been eating healthier. Well, I haven't dropped anything, and I said, "Well, you have to remember, I'm getting up before you're getting out of bed, and I've already got an hour's worth of exercise under my belt, um, and I've started my day off right." So, um, but cool thing is they start seeing, the changes and, um, you know, like I said yesterday, when I actually picked a chip up and ate a chip, my son looked at me and was like, "You're actually going to eat that?" And I said, "Yeah, why? Because I wanted to see, in an hour later what the keto air, did after I ate 5 chips, because I have not eaten 5 chips since I started all this. So, um, anyway, but once again, things were good. I mean, I blew like a 25, I think. So, but I think that's a lot to do with, getting your body, me getting up and exercising and keeping active and, not making, I didn't have the whole basket of chips, I just had five, I didn't have the tortillas with my meal, those type of things. So it all plays into it. But that environment thing, for both of them, has been, like, but now they've even caught on. They aren't eating the chips. Like I said, my wife's like, well, we have to throw these away because they're stale. I'm like, well, throw them away. Um, that's good. We're buying more, more healthy snacks, and eating those versus the quick, easy, potato chips or cheese and peanut butter crackers and all those different things that are easy to grab and eat. But now it's like, oh, let's grab some meat and some cheese as a snack, and you quickly go, oh, just a couple pieces of lunch meat or whatever, and a thing of string cheese, and you're full. That's taking care of it. Where before, I mean, I could just sit there and dang near eat a whole bag of chips, and still not be full. It was just filled me full of empty calories and carbs and all that other stuff. Um, so that environment, cleaning that out, the environment and that temptation not being there is huge when it comes to being successful at this. And then just keeping, for me, it's keeping the whole goal of making my blood healthier. Is every time I'm like, I could eat that. Nope, not going to. My secretary, uh, God bless her, last week being police week, there was people dropping stuff off at the police department all
Yeah.
the time, and
Yep.
and she comes up, one of the other officers' wife, where she got these from, I don't know, but they looked delicious. They were brownies, and they were about yay big. And I mean, and she came up with three of them, one for me, one for the assistant chief, and one for the lieutenant. And I looked at her, I go, "Are you serious?" And she goes, "Oh my God, I forgot you're doing that." She goes, "Oh, just eat it." Nope. I was still sitting on her desk the next day, and she's like, "You're not going to eat that, are you?" I said, "Nope." And about that time, our parking enforcement lady come in, and I said, "Connie, here you go. Have a brownie."
And then you
So
felt bad for poisoning Connie.
yeah, that poison Connie, but she gets her steps in every day, walking around, doing the parking ticket thing. So um, anyway,
Well,
but
but I'm glad you. So that again, not to get on a sidebar, but it's an interesting phenomena, right? Like people see the change in you. They know that you're on this program, but then they bring it up like, just do it. Come on.
right,
It's just like, come on, just like one little hit off this crack pipe. Come on,
yep.
just one little hit. Well, everybody else is doing it. You'll be fine.
And that's like I mentioned earlier
And then
about
you
the ice
feel
cream
bad for saying no, right?
thing. And my wife, yesterday she was like, you do not know how much I've been jonesing for some ice cream." And I'm like, "If you want it, go get it." I said, I'm not going to do it." I said, "Because it is terrible for you." And she goes, "But I'm just wanting it." And I said, "Well, if you want it, go get it." I said, "But I don't want it. I don't." And she said, "You've got to want it." And I'm like, "Oh, would it taste good? Absolutely." But I said, "I don't want the end result." And she
Yeah.
just kind of looked at me and goes, "Okay." So, um,
And what
anyway,
is it? And so the end result in the immediate future, and this is like this is why we're in such like this is why such a big problem for this country. It's the world, right? Um, the engineering that goes in by the food scientists behind the scenes to create that perfect texture, the perfect mixture of salt, sugar, and fat. It's called the bliss point. It's a scientific term. Like there are people. It's the same thing as the looking at your phone, getting stuck in a doom scroll. It's like the science. We know how to capture your attention, and we feed you more to capture more because that's how the algorithms monetize your brain. The food companies are like those two things are the same. They're not separated. It's not a fucking conspiracy. Like I don't say that F word very often. That might be the first or second time I've say that on this podcast, but that's the truth. And there are people that want your money at the grocery store when you're going through the checkout line and they want it coming
Yes.
back, and they don't give two shits about your health. They don't care if you're 50, 100, 200 pounds overweight. They don't care that you've got, that someday you've got type 2 diabetes and that someday you're going to have dementia that's going to lead to Alzheimer's disease. Um, so that, I mean, when you say no, that's what you're saying no to. Um, and I think you don't you don't have to be rude in saying no. There can be, and this is what I try to tell people this all the time. Like I've been doing at this for a long time. You can be polite and just say, "Hey, you know what? I really appreciate that, but that's, I'm eating healthy and that's not part of what I'm going to do. I know that would be ta I know it would taste really good, but that's just not part of my plan right now. Thanks. Like,
Mhm.
hey, but listen, if the next time, if you're ever going to make something, like if you make something that's like sugar-free or a ketogenic version or a paleo version of that, let me know. I'd be happy to try that. Because, for the people that want to please, and they're doing this to be kind, they're not, no one's doing it because they want you to be fat and
No,
miserable or to
no.
be type 2 diabetic. They're doing it because they want to do something nice for you. And I don't think it's rude to give them, an alternative. And, so when it comes to ice cream, the good news is like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, trying to find some of these things in the grocery store, it wasn't happening. Like
Yep.
you just weren't finding it. Like, all right, dude, like I'm watching the Super Bowl, like who doesn't want to eat some chips? Well, guess what? There are some chips that you can eat that are based in flax and other things. Uh, that aren't going to spike your blood sugar. And you can get those things and you can eat like a nice guacamole dip with them, a nice cheese dip with them. Like there are things that you can find that you will like that will also align with how your body reacts and what kind of insulin spike that you get from it. But you got to go through a few months where you're doing things like this to understand.
Yep.
You have to calibrate. Like you've got to fine tune what works for you. Um, and thankfully nowadays, even there's lab tests that people can do, like really comprehensive blood tests based on your phenotypes and DNA, where they can say, like these are the things that are probably going to generally work for you that are going to be non-inflammatory. These are the things that you should probably avoid. But what I tell everyone in the end is you just got to experiment, and that takes time, it takes effort, it takes a conscious decision to say, you know what, I'm going to do this. And here's where I'm so excited is because, Greenie has this saying is like he's like cops are going to lead the nation out of the metabolic mess that we're in, and we are in a metabolic crisis. So it's really exciting to see, like, regardless of what you think about like Robert Kennedy and his position
Right.
on vaccines or whatever, like you look at him, he's 70, I think he's 72 years old. He's in his 70s. You want to look like him at 72 or oh, by the way, the average lifespan for males in the US is 78, but for cops, it's in the upper 50s. You want to look like Robert Kennedy when you retire and live into your retirement, or do you want to look like the guy that ate, whatever he wanted whenever he wanted? Um,
Yep.
and so yeah, like Casey Means being like her book Good Energy, like she's just getting attacked in the mainstream media right now as the potential next Surgeon General. And I'm just like, why? Like, why? Like, have you read her book? Like, I see people just pile, like, people like they're so dogmatic again about nutrition and everything. They just pile on. Like, her book is one of the better ones that I've read, and I've read some good ones. I'm on a bit of a ramble here, but here's where I'm so excited because what we've done in our program in this 4-month metabolic reset program is we've set the table and we've shown like people like you, like they are showing the path forward. Like you are now going to be a shining star example for other chiefs and other leaders around the state, and then hopefully for, the generation of cops that you're raising and training and developing at your agency. Um, doesn't matter. You went from the biggest agency in the state of Indiana, right, as an employee to, the average size police department in
Yep.
America,
Yep.
right? You know, 20, 30, 40 police officers. That's the average size police department. And it's all of them, and it doesn't matter what size agency you're in. You can like the stressors are very, very similar. The shifts are the same. The drivers for metabolic dysregulation are the same, and that's why, in, we got to spend just as much time understanding our metabolic health as we do our defensive tactics, our EVOC training, our firearms training, all the state mandates. I mean, this needs to be a state mandated curriculum for every police officer in America. How do you control uh, good metabolic health? Because that drives the 6 inches between your ears is the most important piece of equipment any officer will take to work any day. And it's the one thing that will lead to a happy, healthy retirement, good performance on the job, and it all starts with what you put in your mouth to eat for lunch, um, and more importantly, what you don't.
Yep,
All right, we've been
absolutely.
going at this a long time. What have I not asked you? We've covered a lot of ground too, and uh, but what just I mean, just some general observations. What have you learned so far? What are you hoping to get here in the next few months? And where do you think you'll be a year from now?
Yeah, no, I'm hoping, I've bought in, and seeing the results from the blood, while I've still got a huge room for improvement on a lot of things, just knowing that I've started that momentum. Um, and like you said, leading the next generation or those that are underneath me. That's one of the biggest things is like I want to be that person that people look at and go, he did it. If he can do it, I can do it. And it's all about, like I said, it's all about your mindset. You just hit it at 68 inches is what drives it. And it's just knowing, like I said, you got to have the motivator. You got to go be like, all right, and it's not like I said, to me, it's not losing the weight. Um, to me, it's making me healthier. I guess maybe I'm at that point in my life now where I know I'm not invincible, and I need, I hope I haven't waited too long. One of those things you haven't waited too long, but I do know that you've got to start somewhere. And mine started in January of with this offer. So, and you mentioned earlier about the death scroll on your phone. What I have found hilarious is all of the keto, halfway healthy recipes that now come up on those death scrolls that I'm
Yeah. The
saving.
algorithms
And
know,
like
man. They're
and like
following
you
your
said,
habits.
oh, and like you said, you think of chips. There's so many ways to make chip, not out of potatoes, but out of different things that are a heck of a lot healthier for you um, than that bag of chips. So anyway, it's just do it. I mean, just take control, get the blood test, and take control. That's one of the biggest things I guess I've gotten out of this is, you know, when I was 247 pounds, I felt like I just lost control. I was not happy, wasn't happy with what I was doing, was people always ask me, do you regret retiring when you did? And I said, no, I don't regret retiring from the state police when I did. I don't regret that at all. Um, what I did regret was losing, I think who I was, and letting myself balloon out of control, and now getting back into it. So, um, you know, one of those things where it's there, the information's out there. I mean, it's crazy when you start searching things, the algorithms that they pull that stuff in that you could do the research. It's not like it used to be where you had to go places to research. You got it in the palm of your hand. Um, and it's just when you start reading the nutrition labels on the foods, I spent I don't know hour well about a week ago in one of the health food stores, and I was like, I mean, this stuff they're selling is not healthy. When you start looking at and this one lady looked at me, but everything I picked up, I was actually looking at the label, wasn't looking at the pretty packaging, and what they were selling on the front. I was looking at the label on the back, and she kept looking at me, and I put it back, and I put it back, and I put it back, and so educate yourself and like I said, motivate yourself for being healthy. Under the hood, like you said, is looking under the hood and knowing what's going on and trying to make that better is what it's all about.
Well, that's awesome. Were you using the Fujicate app? This, and
I have
again, I don't get paid to endorse Fujicate, but there are
I did
again
pull that
different
out
app.
that day and put it on a couple of things, but I was just looking like, okay, how many, this says it's a healthy, whatever. And I turned it over and I'm like,
Yeah.
look at all the sugars and all the carbs and I mean, all the stuff that's in that. So, um, maybe it's healthier than other options, but was it by any means healthy? I didn't think so after learning what I've learned over, the last few months. So
Yeah. I mean, it's just like a computer program, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If you eat
absolutely.
garbage, you know that you're going to get garbage type results. So,
Yep.
um, it's a yeah. I mean, it's a very complex interaction, and we make it, I think, sometimes a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. But also, I think people intentionally make it difficult to try to keep you trapped. And
Yes.
um, what we're hoping to do is, again, we'll talk again here in a few months as we wrap up this 4-month metabolic reset program. And the reason we do 4 months is because 4 months is enough time to show people how quickly changes will positively impact uh, your labs and your metabolic health, if you're testing and you know what to look for.
Yep. Yep.
And that's, it's just like going to the gym and working out or working out at home, whatever, right? It's just like anything else. You notice, hey, the more I lift weights, the firmer and bigger my muscles get. It's like, well, yeah, because you're giving it daily attention, and this is no different, right? And I think you've mentioned this a couple times, and I let's close on this, but this isn't about um, weight loss per se. This is about regaining control of your metabolic health. Weight loss is just a byproduct of making the
Yes.
right decisions. And there's a lot of people that are skinny fat that don't need to lose weight, and quite frankly need to gain more lean muscle mass, uh, that they will benefit from this type of nutrition program and understanding their insulin levels. So it's, again, that's why I caution people. It's not just about weight. Now, I used to joke about this in our CrossFit gym, right? A little bit of narcissism can go a long way in the gym. It's like if you care about what you look like in the
Right.
mirror, like, you want to look a little bit better naked, well, good.
Yep.
If that's what motivates you, great. But it's hard to sustain that over the long term. But when you start, looking, if you've ever cared or seen someone decline from dementia and Alzheimer's like I have, that's a powerful motivator. If you've seen the number of cops that we've seen that have died from cardiovascular disease, that is a powerful motivator. If you've seen the number of people that are dying from suicide in our profession and just society in general, that's a powerful motivator. Um, and so there's a million reasons why we need to do this, and very few reasons why we shouldn't. So thanks for being part of the program, Chad. I really
Hey,
appreciate it.
thanks for offering it up. I feel blessed to be able to partake in it and learn from it. So
All right. Well, we're going to be talking again soon. So in the meantime, let's close it out with this. What's your go-to meal now? If there's one thing that you like are going to eat on a regular basis now, what is it?
my favorite, and my wife's like, "Don't you get tired of eating a salad?" And I said, "No." I said, "Because I don't get the croutons and all that stuff on it." Like I said, it's a feta chicken salad that store here in town makes. I mean, I just absolutely love it, and it's like I said, fresh spinach, grilled chicken breast, um, got some cheese, some celery, um, some pecans, just a few pecans on there to give it a little extra crunch, some extra fats, but it's all nature. Nothing's processed. And I mean, I
It's
could eat
all
that every
one
day.
ingredient food.
Yeah. And then, like I said, it's all natural stuff. So that, and I've always loved salmon. That was another thing when this come up. I was like, oh, I can eat salmon. So real quick, bowling, the big thing is after a bowling tournament, where we go to Texas Roadhouse. And so Carrie's like, well, you're gonna be able, my wife, are you gonna be able to do that? And I said, yeah, I'll just, not eat the rolls. And she's like, oh, you will too. So far, batting 1,000, haven't eaten the rolls, haven't eaten, all the other stuff. Um,
Well, you can't
and
like if your wife challenges you like that, there's no way you're
Yeah,
going there to eat one
but
anyway, right?
instead I go for the salmon. I go for the fresh, vegetables that they have as the side. And I have just as good a meal and time as everybody else, except I'm putting better fuel in my body, than what they're choosing to do. So, like I said, it's not that big of a deal. It truly isn't. When you're going out with folks all the time, um, and they start to, I think they start to look at you and respect you for being able to say, no, I'm not eating all those rolls. I'm not doing it. So anyway, just trying to be that, hopefully that motivated for others to get healthy.
I love it, man. Record setting Chad Dick, Chief of Police.
Yeah, my
Now,
wife loved it that
hey,
night
I
when I
hate to,
walked
I
in
hate
and I
to.
went, you know who this guy is? And she's like, what? I said, I'm Greeny's record holder.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, you better stay tight
Uh-oh, got another one coming,
because
huh?
there are a couple people that are knocking on the door, man.
Oh, cool.
It's
Good.
yeah, the results that we've gotten out of this group have like, I mean, they are just out of this world.
That's awesome.
So, yep. So we're actually, you guys have taught us every time we do one of these pilots and projects, we learn a little bit more and exciting stuff coming in the future. You mentioned the Coptimizer electrolyte drink. That was a product that was born out of uh, these pilot projects and trying to give people a good, healthy electrolyte alternative. It's an allulose based product and you can't buy it yet, but pretty soon you'll be able to. And because we've seen, it's yeah, just a great, providing people with another little tool to help keep them rolling. So keep after it, Chief. I love it, and I'm
Hey,
looking forward to seeing what your numbers look like again when we retest at the end of June. This is going to be good stuff, man.
sounds good.
All
Well, I
right.
really appreciate it.
Well, hey, everyone, I know this went a little bit long, but we appreciate it. There was so much to talk about again, and we're just kind of scraping the surface. We could talk, literally, I'm sure we could talk for hours about this. Um, but just trying to provide a little bit of motivation. I'm super excited for Chief and his story and where he's going. We'll plan some follow-up conversations and put some more material together down the road as we go. But until the next time, we're going to be 1042.